Good morning. I'm now situated here. We're going to get started with our first of our three final classes. I know it's so sad that this time we have together will be coming to a closing, but it has to happen. Let me just open my slides. Yeah. So before I even talk about anything, which I'm really going to start rambling soon, so quick reminders, just in general. One for more of like the game, like GSA itself, and then one for just this class, online Q&A, and final lab activity. So there is going to be two guest speakers. They are some senior product managers from Valorant, um, Tiffany Tsay and Armand as Durian. I said that wrong. I'm sorry. It's going to be an online Q&A Thursday, November 20th, 9 p.m. I'm pretty sure it's going to be in the GDSA Discord, so just tune in for that. You're going to want to be there. It's the final session we have for the year. So yeah, keep posted for that. And then also next week is going to be this class's final lab activity. It's going to be very fun. We're going to make a really cool grass shader, and trust me, it's gonna be pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's gonna be a little hint. We're gonna have our two planes, and then we're just gonna draw some simple grass off clip textures, as you can see up there, kind of like what we did for the tomato. If you did that with me, and then we're going to create a little interesting shader within Unity Shader Graph, and I'll show you simply how to do that. So that will be starting November 20th, 11:10 a.m. in the lab, which is next week, and it will be due November 24th, which is Monday night. So you get enough time to finish that. And if we have time, we'll be able to we could try to make some tree leaves as well, which would not be a part of the marking, but that could be fun to do. So, fun fact of today, or fun website of today, is Shader Toy. So, Shader Toy is one of my favorite websites I found in recent time. Pretty much, you can look at any shader that people make online. It runs in your browser, and the best part is, oh, I didn't show it, but you can see that there's code right beside the shaders that you are viewing. So you're able to, it's all GLSL, and we haven't learned that, of course. That's a bit more technical, but it's cool because you can see the shader, and then you can see how it was made, and then you can edit the code, change parameters around, tweak it to see what happens, right? And it's just like you can browse an infinite amount of shaders that the community creates, and it's probably my favorite website that I've seen in a while, just because there's so much creativity and so much to explore, and like the fact that your computer can do this in the browser, I think is wonderful. So yeah, here's some examples of some shots I really like. This is some fan art from the game Journey. Someone recreated this with shaders. I thought that's unbelievable. The fact that this is all done with code, right? Not a single bit of blendering or anything, right? And then next one here, this was a really interesting one. This is like a cool looking scene with realistic lighting. The walls are really bumpy and interesting. I was like, yeah, I should showcase this. And then actually this one as well, you can like walk around as well. It's really cool. It's like really interactive. And then this one as well, it's like a swirling sort of effect. And most shaders you'll find are also animated. So this is a static image, but you would see that you can actually like see the whole flames here moving and everything. It's really cool. And yeah, so now to the content, the actual juice is terrain. That's what we're all here for today. Let me just get my chair. So we are working on our dioramas that we're going to be submitting for a final assignment. And I think a very important aspect of making your dioramas is having a foundational ground to build it on, right? So what is terrain? How is it relevant to us? Terrain keeps your diorama grounded, as I just said. So you have this landscape that can connect different parts of your scene, such as the trees to the ground, the rocks, maybe if you have a little building or some player or some foliage or something. It just keeps everything in a space that makes sense versus everything just floating in space, right? It's like if you're making a game level, which we're not in this case, but if you were, it's like the floor plan to your game, right? And the floor plan is for a level designer is probably the first step you would do to making a level, right? And so the floor plan ties heavily into your terrain for a game, right? And most games would have this. Some exceptions I would assume would be something like a space themed game where you're in space so there's no ground underneath you. But most cases you're going to need terrain in one way or another. How do we make terrain, right? This seems a bit daunting to just kind of go at first. And not gonna lie, it's still a bit of a challenge for me to figure out what's the best for each project I'm doing. It really depends on the use case. There are a few methods we can leverage to a great extent, such as procedural mesh generation, which is more often used for large scale environments or background elements, right? The areas you would be walking in usually would be done with hand created poly modeling, which you can see in the top image here. This is a fun YouTube video I found before where everything's just done with very simple blocked out planes and shapes, and then you build then your level around that, right? My preferred approach is a mixture of both procedural and hand creation, right? Because you get the strengths of the procedural generation, getting things looking really interesting really quickly, but then you still get the fine tuning that hand making it gets you. And there are some terrain tools for certain engines, like Unreal and Unity have their terrain tool systems, which are quite powerful, but can be very tedious to learn fully. You can fight with it a lot, I found, but they do get good results if you can figure them out. However, I don't think we're going to be using them today. What makes sense for us? We need to pick right? So I assume most people are going to be making relatively small in diorama environment terrain pieces, right? So you don't need a large scale environment. You need something small, like this is what I worked on yesterday as an example, a little plot of land that you can then put your different assets that you're creating on, right? So the Unity terrain tool I found would be too big for this kind of work. And one other problem with the terrain tool is you don't get it. It's harder to do elevation, which I'll touch on in a little bit. We can still use procedural elements for this workflow in Blender to get some results that are not just really repetitive. So terrain creation, we're going to get started pretty much right away on making this terrain if you want to work on this for yourself or however it's going to work for your environment. You don't have to copy me exactly. Just follow along with the main principles I'm going to outline, and depending on what your diorama needs, then base this on that. So number one is the scaling. This is always one of the most important parts of modeling in general, is scaling. And if you haven't already, make sure you have your Blender scene open that you're going to be working in. So I like to use the UE5 or 4 mannequin. I believe Marcus provided it in week 7 here, as I outlined. This helps you keep the scale realistic and grounded in reality, and prevents frustration later if you have to scale the entire map down. And that would be really frustrating if you're far into development. And I like to start with a plane mesh, right? So we're gonna get started now on that. I'm going to All right, so I'm gonna make my new collection here. I'm just gonna call this terrain. And I'm gonna create another collection. This will be my assets, possibly. And I'm just gonna make sure they're at the same level here. Yep. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yes, you can definitely make a kit bash terrain kit. For my some of my environments I've done previously, I would make my golden rule. I should have put in the slides actually. Is three, having three unique assets that you can customize your environment with, like three different kinds of rocks, three different kinds of trees, three different kinds of grass hill types or whatever. Yeah, so you can definitely do that. Just for today's example, I'm kind of making it all custom, right? Because we have a small environment, so we don't need to really tile it beyond that or make it bigger than that. So I'm just going to, first of all, I'm going to bring in my references, right? So I'm going to import FBX. If you're doing this in a scene with your props or assets already, then you won't have to worry about importing everything in. But I'm just going to do that real quick. There you go. Right, and what I'm thinking right now is I want this environment or this terrain to house or to ground that building, that medieval building I was working on before for the GDW project. So I'm just going to also import that in here, or I'm just going to open a new Blender project with it in it. There we go. There you go. Exports. Right, so here's my building. Shading. I'm just gonna make sure my building, because it uses vertex colors, so I'm just in the shader editor, I'm just adding the attribute into base color here. So now you can see that those colors appear. Right? So here's my building. I'm just gonna move this to the side a bit. Here's my character. Maybe I want to also have some props. So maybe I'll take this cart that I built earlier, the one for this class that we worked on, bring that in, right? So move that to the side. There we go. All right, that's enough for now. So I want to build this scene, this terrain around these models. So first thing I'm going to do is, so all these assets are in the assets collection I created. I'm going to click on the terrain collection now, and then Shift A, create a plane. So our mesh is going to be based on this plane. We're going to start here, right? And so now we have our scale model with a plane as well. Number two, we're going to start very simple. So we're going to start extruding from this plane here. So we're not going to move it. We're not going to move it at all from 0, 0, unless you want to move it in object mode, but I'm just going to keep it at 0, 0. I recommend turning on, if you see here, this snap or the weld mode. So whenever you bring a vertice or like a mesh close to another vertice, those vertices will snap together and become one vertice. And then you would also have to change your snap at the top here to vertex. Oops. And I'll show you exactly what that does. So if I go into edit mode and I click E, also you can be pretty or you don't have to worry about being super on the grid here. You can kind of, because it's terrain, you can drag things in your scene like this and just move them out, right? So let's say I drag out some pieces of this plane here like so. And with my snap mode on vertex right here, and then in the top right here, if I have this option turned on, which is auto merge vertices, I should be able to click E, hold down Control, and then it will just snap this edge here straight to that corner right there. And then that will become one mesh. If you're having issues, then make sure your snap base is on closest, because I find that works the best here. Right, so now we're just going to select edges and just kind of drag them out. Select edges, bring them out. Personally, I don't want to see the grid, so I'm just going to hide that for now. Because once again, we're just kind of eyeballing it. Right. Maybe this building here is going to be a little lower, like so. I could even click, if you click GG, here's a tip, GG will slide the vertices along like so. So you don't have to worry about moving them by hand. They'll just slide along those other edges. Right, maybe I want to take 3 of these faces here, drag those out, alt select these, move that up. Right, so you don't worry about being exactly like me. Just extrude. Once again, if you click E and then hold Control, it will just snap to those corners and it should just all merge together. This is you can consider this like an old school way of modeling, but it's never going to go out of style because it's just so convenient for getting a block out of things. Right now I'm noticing that this terrain it's looking still very square like, and I don't like that. So I'm going to try to break that up a bit. I'm going to extrude and just sort of try to move things in a different direction. Right. Oops. This cart's kind of in the way. Let me move this cart up a bit. Here we go. Right, and we'll just keep playing around, adding more faces like so. Maybe behind here, I want to add a bit of a drop off, a scary little drop off. Right. And then if you have something like a quad like this, if you want to make it less sharp, you can sort of just bring that in a little bit, and that should smoothen out that transition a bit. Same here, I can just kind of bring that in. Maybe I can also add a control R loop cut here. Right, terrain's also, it's just a very finicky thing, so don't worry about it being a little strange at first, a little off feeling, right? Just building out something, right? And then this is, so right now already, we're getting something that looks quite organic. I am noticing this sharp seam here, like it's very sharp and unrealistic. So we're going to want to probably bring out some of these faces like this. So E to extrude those. And then maybe I want to do something like this. But then again, that's a bit of a scary kind of topology there. So maybe I'll try to fix that a bit. There we go. Sweet. And this should lead us into this next part I'm going to discuss. Right? We're smoothing out these corners once again, just kind of bringing those in. Give us this kind of cool shape, right? And then next I want to talk about is elevation. So when you're doing a floor plan for any game, usually, because most of the time you'd be sketching them first, you would be doing it from a top-down perspective most of the time. So it's very easy to have everything on the same level, right? There's no up and down verticality. I recommend to build up or down. Like this is an example I did before. Verticality adds a ton to the environmental appeal. Even just a little bit makes a big difference in how it feels to navigate, right? Flat environments are kind of meh, right? So what I'm thinking is maybe I want a little drop off in one spot in this environment here, in this terrain. So what I can do, I'll leave a triangle there. That's a bit, triangles are not the best thing to leave, but I'm gonna leave that there. So I'm just gonna grab a few, I'm gonna go into face select mode and just shift select a few of these faces and then shift E, bring those down, maybe here. And sort of just play around, see what, use my imagination, see what kind of shapes I can get here, right? Maybe, oh, maybe I want to have a little path that goes down this hill. So maybe I can L to select that entire set of meshes there, go to top view, rotate that a bit, and then just Alt select or Shift select these edges here, and just kind of bring that like so. And remember elevation, so we're going to GZ upwards. Now I'm going to select this vertice here. And because we are also in vertex snap, I can just G control snap that right there. I can select these edges, extrude, hold control to snap it to that corner, right? So kind of just building out this interesting little terrain. Maybe I want a little lookout here. I can do just that. And because we can't have this going on forever, eventually you just might want to cut it off, stop building out this terrain. So I'm going to kind of end it around here. Maybe one more. Like so. And we could even come over to another area of our model here, extrude some more faces, maybe bring these faces up a lot more, right? I'm going to, in edge select mode, I'm going to alt select these two, or this edge loop here, and then Control B to bevel that out just a little bit. That's what I think I want here. Oops. Right. Like so. And I'm imagining maybe there's some sort of giant rock here. I don't know why I just imagine that, like a giant rock type thing. I'm gonna quickly just block that out. I'm gonna grab this square here, this plane, Shift D. You don't have to do this, I'm just kind of imagining this here. Scale that up a bit. E to extrude. I don't want it to be inverted. Also make sure up here, viewport overlays, face orientation on, so that you can check for those inverted normals. Right, and all this so far, usually I tell you to use subdivision surface right away. Right now, sorry? It's going to be, so if you look up here in the viewport overlays, there's this face orientation tab. And then that you'll see inverted faces are red. You're welcome. Right, so this is like, imagine this is like a big boulder or something. You can use your imagination here. But I'm just going to kind of build out this like rocky shape. Like so. That's good for now. I'm kind of liking how this is looking. Maybe I'll bring this all down a bit. Yeah. What I did was I selected one of these edges here, or these faces. Shift D to just bring that out, make a new geometry. And then from there, I just clicked E to extrude. And then I could manipulate this a little bit. That's optional, you don't have to do that, but that's what I did. Right, so I'm liking how this is looking. I am noticing though, the way I made this elevation, this house does seem to be a bit hidden from the view as much. Maybe I want to slightly raise this terrain right here to accentuate the importance of this building. Right, and all these buildings, this is going to be your own little set pieces that you're going to build this terrain around. Right. So there we go. That feels a lot more logical. Maybe this, yeah, I think this is a good spot to have this cart for now. Right, I'm picturing this as my main shot, because you're also going to want to have your dioramas at specific angles, like shot angles. So I'm picturing it like this, with this part down here also at the forefront. Right? All right, like that. So we added some elevation, right? Next, we can still use modifiers where we want to, right? Modifiers are helpful. So what I did for this example here is I added 3 modifiers: subdivision surface, for one extra level, displacement and weight and normals. So it always depends on your use case. I'm assuming for this kind of terrain here, we would want a subdivision surface. So if you go to modifiers, we can add generate subdivision surface. And because the way we modeled so much extra polys early on, our model's not going to shrink as much as it would usually. Like with this rock here, for example, because it's much more limited in its polys, this modifier affects it more. With this terrain here, it's not as destructive to it. It just smoothens out these corners that we defined here. And if you don't like how this looks, you can definitely just not use subdivision surface. But I think I might try to use it here. And maybe I want to, at these corners here, I'm noticing I want to bring them down. I sort of want the edges of my terrain to slope down versus sloping up, right? And so turning on that modifier helped me to see that. You see? I don't like how this looks. I'm gonna fix this. There we go. And if you get annoyed with how the modifier is affecting your modeling, you can just click on this computer monitor here to hide it for now, if you want. There we go. Right. I'm just going to bring these down. This is already looking really, really nice, I think. Right. We can also add a displacement modifier. I'll teach you about this now. Displacement is really cool because you can procedurally manipulate the geometry of your model based on texture maps, right? So it's kind of a similar, you'd find this in programs like Substance Designer if you were looking more in depth on height maps and everything. But we're gonna add that here. We're gonna add modifier, deform, displace, yes. And right now you're gonna notice nothing really happens except your model kind of just extrudes out a bit, which is not what we really want. You see here there's add a new texture. So we're gonna click that. Now there's a texture 001. For you it's gonna be texture, but for me it's 01 because I already have one in the scene. You'll see there should be this new pop-up here called texture at the very underneath material, texture. If you click on that, you will see the texture that you just made, and it's gonna be black. Texture or image or movie. We're gonna click on that, and then choose one of these noises here. I like to do clouds. I think clouds always gives a very subtle but noticeable result. You can see here already, we're getting a lot of this extra detailing, this tiny little minute details, and that's with the subdivision on already. So in the hierarchy here, you can see subdivision first, and then the displace, or displace. Was it? Yeah. Say it again. Yeah. You see here this window texture. You change the image or movie type to clouds. Do you see that? Yeah, you're welcome. And then here you can change things like the size, the depth. I'm going to turn up the size a little bit. You see, as I turn the size up, it changes how large that cloud displacement is on this terrain here. So I want it to be probably like 1.5. I think that's pretty cool, right? It depends on your use case. And then if you go back into your modifiers here, you can change the strength and the mid-level. The strength is the amount of displacement it's going to be applied to your model. The mid-level is which direction that displacement will happen on, right? So if you set it to 0.5, it'll just kind of displace from the middle, so both directions. You can play around with these parameters, but I like to turn down my strength a little bit because I want it to be kind of subtle. I'm going to how's 0.5 look? Yeah, I'll do 0.5 for now. Like, it's not supposed to be extremely noticeable, but it adds a bit of extra sharpness and breaks up that smooth procedural look that makes things look fake, right? Right off the bat, this is looking pretty cool. And I don't like how this rock I made is looking very smooth. So what I'm going to do, if you made a rock, you can do this too. I'm going to click on, so deselect everything. Click L while hovering over it to select the entire model. And then Shift E to sort of bring out those seams or those creases. Not all the way though, just a little bit more. You see, if I go all the way, it becomes very sharp and low poly looking. If I bring it out almost all the way, so like this, it still has a bit of that extra roundness, right? So that's looking pretty good. Building out this terrain. I am seeing some hovering on this building here, and that's no problem to fix. The power of modifiers, we only have this much geometry to work with. You can see here. So I can just move this geometry like so. I don't have to worry about creating a lot of excess geometry. As long as we have these subdivisions here, we don't have to worry. Or these modifiers here, we don't have to worry. So I like that. Last, we can add a weighted normal, because unless you're going for low poly look that requires those sharp faces, you're probably going to want to add a modifier called, if you go in normals here, weighted normal. This one, it's pretty much the same as shade auto smooth or shade smooth, but you get more control. This weight here, you can turn this up to, you can see the rock there. If I turn up to 100, it's a lot more, those sharp edges are more prominent. But if I turn it down lower, it becomes more of a blur. So I'm going to turn this, by default it's at 50. I'm going to turn it up to like maybe 65 or something for now. So it's still a little sharp, but not too much. Also, instead of viewport, or my viewport shading is on material preview right now, just so I can see the lighting of the scene better. I like to work on my terrain like this. That's just my preference, but you're more than welcome to tweak this viewport shading to your preference. Okay, we've had some time to create this terrain, add some modifiers. Next up is we want to visualize this better. Right now everything looks very flat and boring, so what we can do is add a texture, right? So I looked at what you all did on Monday, and I saw that Marcus had you making a tileable texture in Substance Painter. So we can leverage that same workflow. We're not going to make an extremely in-depth texture. You're more than welcome to use your own texture if you like, but we just want something to visualize on our grass here to give it some more variety. So what I'm going to have you all do is I provided, to make it easier, I provided on canvas this SM tiling plane 01. It's pretty much that plane that Marcus made in class to texture in Substance Painter with. So you can see the tiling. So if you want to grab that, you can. I'm just going to click. I think I already downloaded that. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to pause this for a moment. I'm going to save the scene. Remember, always saving the scene. And now I'm going to go into Painter. Also, if you do this, you can definitely work on this texture and then submit this, if you like, for Marcus's weekly submission. But this should be pretty straightforward. I'm going to click New. My template is still PBR, Metallic Roughness Alpha Blend. I want to make the resolution 2048. I like to do 2048 because it's tiling. It's a tiling texture. So it's a little big. You can always turn it down in Engine. So maybe I'll do 2024. Yeah, I'll do 2024. If you want, you can change it always later. And I'm going to set it to OpenGL because you're very likely going to use Unity to render this or SketchUp, and I'm pretty sure they both use OpenGL normal maps. Make sure auto unwrap isn't enabled, import cameras isn't enabled. These things are all disabled, disabled, disabled. Just these two like this. Select your file. I'm going to go select that tiling plane I made and open. And you should see this plane like this, right? And as Marcus showed, it's tiling like this. Yes. So that's going to help us create a little grass texture, right? So first things first, I'm going to delete that layer right there. I'm going to create a folder. I always like to organize in folders and call it grass. Sorry? Yeah, right? It's so useful. It's so cool. And it's great because you don't have to, if you make the entire UV space that one plane, you don't have to worry about it tiling. It'll always work as you export it. It's just always going to tile properly, right? And it's really easy to set up. But yeah, we're going to create a fill layer right away. And you'll notice in the slides here, I put it in grayscale. What I did was I made it first like this, like it's a proper greens and brown colors. And then I added a filter to make it grayscale because I noticed I could utilize the same grayscale texture for both the grass and the stone, the rocks we're going to make soon. And all I did was vertex color them differently. So the grayscale acts as the shading, and then the vertex colors act as the coloring. So you can use the exact same texture for two different parts of your model, right? And because the grass is pretty much just a noise, I got away with that. So once again, vertex colors are just great. And just keep in mind, you'll have to figure out always how each engine utilizes vertex colors. Pretty sure Unity by default uses them without, like, with the default lit shader, it just works, to my knowledge. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create this fill layer. I'm gonna call it dirt. Yeah. Sorry? Not for this. This is gonna just be a flat color texture. We're not really gonna do any normals or height for this. So we're gonna create this dirt, and we're just gonna really worry about color for now. We're gonna make it, I'm gonna get my references open, my puref. Oops. Texture. Right, so I'm going on Pinterest, and I'm just kind of looking for an ideal grass texture that we can reference. I already had this reference here. I like kind of the way this is feeling. Maybe we can grab something like something simple. I like the patchiness here. I'm gonna drag this in my pref. This one too. This is nice. There we go, that's enough for now. So now I'm gonna go back into Substance Painter, and I created this dirt fill layer like so. So it's just a solid color. And then now we're gonna add a new fill layer. I'm gonna call this Grass 01. I'm gonna set this to maybe a slightly yellowish green, like this. Like that. And then now I'm gonna add a black mask on top. And then in that black mask, right click, I'll add a fill layer. Right, so once again, I have this dirt fill layer, which I'll just add the color to, this dirt color. On top of it, Grass 01, which is this green base color, and it's not too saturated or too dark. It's just kind of in the middle. And then I add a black mask, and then add a fill layer to that black mask, like here. And then in here, the best, I always find it's gonna be clouds. These 3 cloud noises are the best for anything stylized. I like clouds too, that's my favorite, personally. We're gonna probably use clouds 3 after. We're gonna use it as well. So there's my clouds 2. And then I'm gonna create a new fill layer. And maybe I'll add my clouds 3 on top. And instead of, so you see here the blending modes are normal. I'm gonna change this one to multiply. So now it's just gonna multiply those 2 cloud textures together, right? And then at this point, we can now change our balance, contrast, and scaling of those different masks, right? And I notice the scaling feels really monotonous, so I'm gonna change the scaling of the second one to 2. Maybe turn the bounce down a little bit. Contrast up a bit. Just play around. I want to make this clouds tiling a little smaller. But if you notice, this is why it's good to be having these extra planes around. You'll see that it doesn't tile if I incorrectly tile it like right here. So you'll see those really sharp, ugly seams. And it'll indicate right away, oh, this is not tiling properly. Whenever you're decreasing the scale like this, you might want to do it in increments of 2. So tiling from 1 to 0.5, actually that doesn't seem to work. So we're just gonna leave it like so. We're gonna change our scale only here at the bottom, see? Like that. And it's looking still a little, doesn't look very hand painted, very stylized. What we can do is on top of these 2 cloud noises, we can add a filter. And then in here, there's a cool filter called Blur Slope. Blur Slope sort of adds this watery cell look to things, like you can see right here. Off, on, off, on, off, on. It adds this little extra splotchiness that looks very painterly, to me at least. I can turn the intensity to 10 and just turn up intensity divider to 10 and just crank this up a bit, right? Maybe this green's a little too limey. I can desaturate it a bit. Maybe make it more yellow. I think that's good for now. I can then Control C, Control V this grass into a second grass, right? The main thing here is as long as you have a noisy looking texture like this, it will look good on your terrain for now as a placeholder. For this grass 02, I'm going to go into my clouds here and I'm going to, you see here there's this option called seed. Seed is going to randomize your noise texture a little bit. So if I click a little bit and then click the other one a little bit, it'll randomize the noise that we get. And I'm also going to change the color to something like a darker, maybe slightly more greenish green, like this. See, that's looking pretty cool. Maybe I want this grass to be more, do I want it smaller? Let's see. Maybe smaller. I'll turn up the scale a little bit. Like that. Maybe change the balance a bit. Slightly more. Contrast slightly down. Right, you're just playing with all these noises that you've created now, and that's procedural, right? So it's so nice. You get so many options. Right? And finally, I'm going to do one more grass. I'm going to duplicate this again. Control C, Control V. Grass 03. And this one will be, I'm going to make this a bit more of a yellow. Very sharp yellow. Mind you, these colors we're just kind of overwrite later, but I'm just kind of using it. When you work with the colors first, it's easier for the grayscale to look good. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to turn the balance really low for that yellow. I want them to be very like little sparkles, little highlights along the grass, right? Maybe it's a little too yellow. I can turn that back a little bit, like so. But you see that blur slope we added really helps to smoothen out that noisiness, easier on the eyes. This is looking pretty cool, right? It's nothing crazy. It's just a simple tiling texture. If you zoom out, you see it's very easy. It's very repetitive, and that's okay because we're just going to combine that with vertex colors later, right? And if it's vague enough, like this, where it can also be other textures as well, right? Because it's not very. This isn't very obviously grass. If I add a grayscale, which here's what we're gonna do next. Because I made this all in a folder, what you can do is you can right click, add a filter. Oh, wait, is there a filter option? Yeah, right here. I don't know why it's on the other side. Add a filter. And then you can, if you type in grayscale, you'll see right here there's this option, grayscale conversion, in the filter properties, right? And that's going to be, you're going to be adding this filter onto that grass folder that we created, so it applies to every single material that we made, or every single fill layer. And once we add that, everything's going to turn gray like this, right? And I'm going to leave the balance as is because those are the values that it's extracting from this, right? And I like how that's looking, right? So we have this simple grayscale now. And this doesn't look like anything but noise. And that's kind of what we want. So at this point, it's very easy to export. We don't really need to worry about making any sort of roughness for this, just because grass and rocky materials are usually not very specular as is. So you can just kind of change that with the slider anyway. But if we want to try, you know what, we can. We're gonna go to our dirt layer here. We're gonna add rough. Turn that roughness all the way, or almost all the way. So I'd say like 0.75. And then on the different grass layers, you can just change the roughness to something like just different values. I'd say anything over 0.5, right? So I'm just gonna go into each of these colors, change that roughness. It's very hard. You won't notice this, but it's definitely there. And it's not really, you don't really have to change the roughness because we're not really gonna use it. Just an example. The main thing is we have this color texture here, or grayscale color texture here. Now we're gonna export it. So make sure you save your Substance Painter file so you don't lose this. Export textures. Pick your directory. I'm gonna pick right here. I'm gonna call this terrain noise. Output template. We're gonna select Unity Universal Render Pipeline Metallic Standard. And we can leave these file types as is and click export. And now this texture will be available in our directory that we placed it in. So if I go back to my terrain here, it's a bit unorganized, oops, here you go. So it created 4 textures. We only really need, if I turn on the image viewing mode, you only really need this one right here. The other ones are not really necessary for what we're doing right now. What we're going to do now is go back into our Blender here. And let me check the slides. We're going to add that texture onto our texture, or onto our terrain here. So click on your terrain. Click on your material properties here. Create new material. I'm going to just call this m underscore terrain underscore material underscore, hold on. That's how I name things. That's like the Unreal naming convention. Confirm. Now we're going to change our base color here. If you click on this yellow dot here, pop up texture, image texture, right? Click on image texture. Everything should turn black. That's okay. Also make sure your viewport shading is on material preview at this point, right? Now click open and find where you placed that export noise. So I'm gonna open, here's my tiling plane right here. It's the grayscale we made. You're gonna notice right away, it's looking weird. It's the UVs are messed up, right? And that's okay because we're gonna fix them right now. So for terrain, you can do there's a few ways you could go about doing the unwraps for the UVs. A popular way I would do it is project from the top view. So if I go into UV editing mode, if I go top view, make sure my view snaps to the top. UVs here are messed up, as you can see. If I click U, and then project from view, it'll create the UVs based on the top view of my model, which is good because it gets you a result really quickly. Let me just turn on my material preview in my UV editor right here. You get the result really quickly at the cost of warping. If you have geometry that's very vertical, like this rock, you get this sharp, ugly UVs here, right? And so in this case, what we can do, because it's terrain and we don't have to worry as much about seams right now, we can kind of revisit it later. We can select our geometry, U, Q projection. And what that's going to do is it's going to, based on every, so it's kind of like a triplanar projection in Substance Painter, where those 6 directions of our, like those 6 view directions, it will create a UV from that direction, right? So you can see the rocks here, the UVs are looking better. You will notice there is going to be a sharp seam along every single one of these corners here, and that's fine because it's terrain, it's not as noticeable. But we do avoid those really ugly, like the warping here, at the cost of sometimes the triplanar. If I turn off my subdivisions, you'll notice that there is this really ugly seam that's created, right? I don't like that. So it's UV unwrapping terrain is, it's really it's like preference, how you approach it. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this rock Q projected, and then I'm just going to L select this flatter mesh here, and then this one I'm just going to U project from view, because you would assume a grass terrain will tile properly, and even some warping is okay for that. But here we go. Now we have this beautiful looking terrain. The texture is a little big right now, so what we can do is we can select all of our UVs here. Remember, we can go into, if we click N in our UV editing tab, we can open our textile density option, calculate TD, send our calculated TD to our set value, and then set TD, right? And that'll just make all those models have the exact same UV island sizes. And then now we can just scale up these UVs. You can kind of eyeball it, but you can see how amazing the tiling is. All those, like the texture that we made, because we made it in Substance Designer, Painter, the way we did, there are no seams when we do this. So we can find our sweet spot that we think fits. I'm gonna say there. I like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool, right? Maybe you want this rock. If we select this entire rock, so click L, normal, length select. Maybe I want to change that to a smaller texture size, treating those larger spots of color as like the rockiness, right? This is breaking some rules of 3D modeling where the textile density is inconsistent, but you can get away with that in some cases if you're trying to create a certain result quickly. So just keep that in mind. And now we have our texture, but it's all grayscale. How are we feeling so far? Do we want a break or anything? Can I get a thumbs up for breaks? Okay, so I guess we can quickly do like a 5-7 minute break. Oh, you just came back from your break? Yeah, we can come back at 12:37, so 10 minutes, and then we'll finish the rest of this terrain. So I'll be back at 12:37, everyone. Yes. Okay, we are back. Oh, hold on. All right, we are back. Welcome, welcome. Hope you had a good break. I see some good work on these terrains so far. And now we're just going to bring that artistic element into this with the next part of our terrain creation. And what would that be? You'd be happy to hear that we're revisiting something we did previously. Vertex colors. Woo! It's funny how what we learned in this class actually applies to what we're doing, for our dioramas. Isn't that wonderful? So, like our lab activities, we are going to set up our nodes shader system like this, like our shader nodes like this, so that we can view our vertex colors as we're painting them, right? And just remember, the way we set up our nodes in here does not transfer over to other engines. Other engines have their ways of displaying the vertex colors, but this is the usual standard way to do it for most engines, such as Unity. So in here, I'm going to click on our model here, click on shading, and if I drag out, you'll see here our texture is already applied. If not, you can apply it. You can create a new image texture and then apply that noise grass texture on it. What we're going to do is create a new node though. We're going to create, it's going to be called color, spelled the American way, attribute. Sorry? For me, it's spacebar. I don't know if it's that for you, is it? No. You can right click and then you can click add here, and then you'd have to find it under color. Is it under color? Or input attribute. Right? I don't know how, because for me it's space to search. I want you to be able to use the search because it's much better. So F3. Is it F3? Can you click F3 for a second? Can you see what that does? Shift A. Oh, there you go. That's actually better. Thank you. Thank you. Because I just click spacebar to search. That's how I set up my keybind. Yeah, so you can click Shift A and then search. Instead of the just attribute, type in color attribute because it's easier to find the vertex colors. So, sorry. Yeah, we're gonna be also adding another node called Shift A, search, mix color, right here, and then plug that in between. Yeah, exactly. We want to change mix to multiply because most engines use multiply as to combine the vertex colors, right? And you'll notice there won't be anything here. There's no attribute in our vertex color attribute, and that's because we haven't created them yet. And a simple way to do that is if we look in our scene here, make sure it's going to already have material preview on. If you control tab and then select vertex paint, so hold control tab, vertex paint, let go. It will create, without you realizing it, it's going to create that attribute for us. So while we have this terrain selected, control tab, vertex paint. And in here, you'll see attribute has appeared. And so we're going to click that in our color attribute, and then combine or plug in color into our B of our color mix node, and then turn the factor to 1. Make sure that's at 1, and it's on multiply. Right, so this is the setup here. I'll leave it there for a second, because if you don't do this properly, when you're texturing with vertex colors, or when you're coloring with vertex colors, it's going to look off. So that's what you do. And I like to set grass roughness to max or close to it, because in real life, there's so much grass in like little grass pieces that the light is so diffused along it that you won't see much of a reflection unless it's wet. But we're just going to kind of bring this roughness up a bit, like so. Yeah.
So what if we, so we do this if we use this, like, how would vertex coloring work if we use the curve version of material, if that makes sense? Like,
The curve version?
yeah, like if we didn't need to go to scale, would it be better to color it like substance painting and then just blend, or would it be better to vertex
Oh,
color?
like the color version.
Yeah.
The color version works as well. The issue is because it's already a set color, you can use those, but it's harder to change the vertex colors because there's already a green color. When you add a blue, for example, it's going to be a weird grayish brown. It doesn't multiply properly. When you have a gray color, it almost acts as a blank slate to then texture onto, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's why I like to use a lot of grayscales. You can use a green grass texture, but I recommend a grayscale, right? And I'll show you why. With this setup, we're going to go back to our layout view. Yep. Yes. If you don't see this attribute option here, what you have to do is you have to select your terrain, Control Tab, hold down Control Tab, and then select the vertex paint at the top, and then let go. And once you do that, once you enter vertex paint mode, it's going to automatically create that attribute option. And if you click on here now, you'll see it, right? So did you add it? All right. Now our shader setup. So we can go back to our layout view and start adding our color. So this is very much preference. I'm going to start by so I'm going to Control Tab Vertex Paint while selecting the terrain. And I'm just going to start drawing out some colors here by hand, right? So I'm going to start with this yellowish color because this will kind of be like a path almost type thing. I'm imagining like a little path through. Yeah, it's all good. Are you in vertex paint mode?
Yeah.
You're just gonna start drawing. So you can select the color at the top here. I like to be very, very reserved with the color choices. I don't like to go super contrasty yellow like this. I like to keep it close to the center, and I like to keep it up here, not too dark. So you pick a color like this, and you'll see that color you pick, it very strongly influences the way the grass looks. You don't have to pick a very saturated color. You can just keep it very reserved, you know? So I'm just gonna keep coloring out like this. Right. So I colored yellow inside. I'm gonna color green on the edges here. You don't have to follow suit. You can make this like a deserty kind of ground texture or a snowy one. I'm just gonna do grass because grass looks cool. Right? Maybe I want to change it to a more bluish, slightly darker color. Subtle changes are nice because it's not noticeable, but your eyes or you can feel the difference much more. So see, I recommend adding a darker color near the edges here. It just looks more, it makes it pop more, you see? So a darker color, green, more saturated color on the edges goes a long way. Because that would be a part that I would find more a fuller, but then somewhere that is commonly walked on. Like think also the narrative of your environment, of your terrain. This area is walked on a lot, probably by the people that live here. So it's going to be much more brownish and dirty or like washed out, right? And maybe even close to the settlement, I can make it really. If I click on the forward slash, it'll isolate only the terrain, right? And so I can just sort of draw that darker foundation area underneath my building here, like this. Oops. And I could even leave this. I like how this looks a little bit like some rock. Like it's a little rocky looking because it's on an angle. So I would assume this would be a cliff. So I might just leave this a little bit brighter. Maybe color this here. Change the colors a bit. Maybe over here. More saturated yellowish. Desaturate. Right? Super fun. Super chill. Just kind of relax and have fun. Because that's what art is about, truly. You see here, this is cool. I'm already liking that a lot. And that did not take very long at all. You just kind of turn your brain off and start coloring. And if you're struggling to get colors where you want them to, a tip is you can turn on, if you go here to viewport overlays, you could turn on wireframe and then maybe turn down the opacity a bit so you can see wherever those wireframes are or where your color is going to be applied mostly. So if you keep that in mind, you can be like, okay, as I bring my cursor towards this corner, it's going to change the color, right? That's how it works. But then if you don't like how it's looking, you can just turn off the wireframe again. But yeah, this is really cool. I like this a lot.
So would you recommend like superimposing it a bit more?
I think one is perfect because our environment isn't going to be insanely high resolution, and terrain is not always like, honestly, terrain doesn't need to be insanely high res compared to what you might think. The main differentiating part about terrain that makes it look detailed is the foliage, the texture maps that you add on top, the normal maps. Those are what give it its depth. If anything, having a very simple actual mesh goes a long way, right? Because it's so easy to manipulate and edit this later. So I recommend just keeping one subdivision on. If you add more, you can get more detail, but at the cost of more polygons that might not be needed. And also, I'm going to quickly texture this rock a little bit. I like how it looks by default, but maybe I want to add a bit of a dark, more blue near the bottom. So I can do that, see? And a little tip, when you're texturing with vertex colors, you want you want values that are lower, or like models at the bottom of models to be darker and then the top of them to be brighter. That gives it a very painterly, realistic style, or not realistic, but like stylized look. Maybe I can add a bit of yellowish hints at the top, or even I could. Here's a little thing. I'm going to Control R, add a loop cut, bring that up a little bit like this. Now I'm in edit mode, by the way. I'm gonna shift select those top two faces. And remember we learned before, we can turn on, if we click up here, we can toggle the mask of the area that we selected. And then just Control X to add that color directly to there. Or you can just draw it by hand, right? As long as you have that mask up here, that blue vertice option on, you can just kind of draw only in that spot. and that's kind of cool. You can get some grass on top of that rock, for example. Right? So that's looking cool.
Now we're gonna use tree maps to make grading simulation. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, right. It saves you extra textures, extra headache. You can just draw with vertex colors. I love vertex colors. I think they're one of my favorite parts of environment art. You don't always have to use them, but most of the time I'm using them because they just work, right? So we have our vertex colored terrain. Next up, we got to figure out how to break these very ugly seams along the edges of our terrain here. It's just floating in space and it looks really jarring, right? So how would I approach it? I would This might be a little more technical, but we're going to get through this. We're going to try to. We're going to extrude from this current meshes that we've created from the edges to then create this rock cliff pieces that will help us to keep our, like, we can create this geometry without having to create brand new geometry, right? So what we're going to do, you don't have to follow what I have exactly here. We'll just do it all together. What we're going to do is we're going to select nothing. I'm going to select nothing and then alt select all these edges and then shift alt select every single edge around the perimeter of all of our terrain, right? Shift alt select. If you have something hidden, you might want to click / to view it. You can see I'm missing some geometry. I might need to move this rock for a second, or just go in X-ray mode. There we go. So I have all that selected, like so. What we're going to do, we're going to click E and then Z and bring that down a little bit. I'd say like this much. So G or EZ, and then bring that straight down, right? So you're kind of making like a little cap type thing. And then I think on the slides I did it a little differently, where I separated this line here or this edge here, but we're not going to do that yet. Instead, we're just going to extrude down again. So, and then click Z to bring it down like so, right? You can eyeball it. I'm going to put it like that for now. Also, actually, before I even extrude down, I don't want unnecessary merging. I'm going to turn off this option up here, auto merge vertices, that we turned on earlier. I'm just going to make sure I don't have extra vertices here, and then I'm going to click E to extrude down, right? So it should look like this, more or less, right? And that looks interesting. It's not exactly something that we're going to keep though, but the way we just extruded downwards here gave us a very easy way to select the entire loop. So if you notice, if I go into edge select mode, which is 2 again, and I alt select right here, it's going to loop select around the entire perimeter of our little terrain we made here. And that's very useful because it helps us to select everything all at once, right? And at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and then mark scene, right? And so now we seamed off this bottom chunk from that top area. And so this, if I deselect everything and then select it, and then make sure, you see at the bottom here, this select linked is an option. Make sure you turn on scene.
It's not there.
Is it not? You might have clicked again and it might have disappeared. So what you're going to do is you're going to click L once, and you should see at the bottom left, select link is there. No? Yeah, so you see it's there, and then we're going to make sure it's on delimit to scene. And that will, it should only select that area that we seamed out. And at this point, we can sort of do a few things here. First, I think I want to fix the seams a bit or change the vertex colors. So with that selected, we're going to Control Tab, Vertex Paint, right? And now we're going to change our vertex color to something around the middle, maybe a little slightly bluish, a little darker. And make sure we have this mask mode on again, remember? And when it's on, Control X. And that should change all those vertices to the gray color that we chose, right?
How do you select on like more just where I have to do this again, like tab, just choose the bottom and something.
If you want to pick a specific area,
I want to like just not figure out.
so whatever you select in, yeah, if you want to do a gradient, for example, which we're going to do next, you would alt select the bottom here, and then Control Tab Vertex Paint, and then change the color to be darker, a little more gray, or a little bluish. You see, and the cool thing about vertex colors is that you get free shading without having to render it. And then once you render it later, it looks even better, right?
Oh
What? Do you change the entire color?
no, I just use the viewport shading color and then just like there's no texture. Just looks like
Duh. That's funny. I think I'm jumping ahead a little bit with the texturing already here, like from my slides, but that's fine. Actually, no, I'm on point. We're gonna also, as I showed, we're blending. Yes, I'll show you. So before I extruded, what I did was I selected the entire perimeter of our plane here. I showed it in here. So I extruded down first. Once in this, actually in this image here, I didn't do it again, but I did it once and then twice. Like, what do you mean? For me, it's blending from gray to green. Yeah. Is it like green here and then down to gray down here? That's because this edge loop here that you made is still green. So you got to select that loop right here and then Control Tab, Vertex Paint, and then set that to gray. And that should fix it. I'll show that again. Yeah, it's a bit interesting of a thing. In edit mode, you're gonna whatever you select, whichever edges you select or faces or vertices, if you then, while selected still, go into Control Tab into Vertex Paint mode, right? Top left here, remember the vertex selection mode? Whatever is selected in edit mode will be the vertexes selected in here. And then from here, whatever you change your color to up here, Control X will change those colors of the selected vertices. Is that working out? Sweet. Right. And so we're so close actually to getting a result that we can work from. We are next going to fix these UVs because they're very ugly. I don't like them. Because we already seamed it, it's easy. We can just click L to select the entire linked seam. Actually, before that, actually no, we can do it like this. Select the entire linked seam. We're going to click or go back into our UV editor. U, Q projection for this case. Right? Actually, we also might want to Q project this up top seam up here as well, because I'm noticing it's still having that weird stretching. So we can, if you did your topology correctly, if you Alt Shift select in face mode right there, see? So click 3 for face mode, Alt Shift select, it should select the entire perimeter like that, right? And then from here, we can then click U, Q projection, right? And that looks a lot better. See? That's a bit of an interesting step, but remember, 3 for face select, Alt select along this edge to select the entire loop, Alt Shift select this edge to select that entire loop, and then U, Q project. And then from here, we could also, maybe you want to just move these UV islands away from the grass to differentiate it. You could then scale this up or down to your liking. I want it a little bigger than the grass because I think rock would make sense to be a little bigger. With Q project, you can kind of get some weird stretching here. A way to fix that would be to seam it out manually, but I think we can just leave that for now because from afar it's harder to notice. Maybe here it's a bit noticeable, but that's fine. The main thing we're going to do next is we're going to start detailing it further. And this is much more of a manual process where we take our geometry and then just manipulate it, accentuate it, remove the flatness we have here already. As you can see right now, I'm going to go back to layout view. We're seeing some very sharp, if I annotate this, very sharp, flat, unattractive looking edges here. The walls are very sharp 90s. This is very unrealistic. Maybe some natural use cases or some natural places have this kind of geometry, but for us, we don't want it to be very uniform like that. Yes, if you're making something like that, then this is more than acceptable. But for us, I find what we can do is we can alt select the bottom there, and first step we can just click S to scale everything out a little bit, just a little bit. Right, that's a start to kind of give it more of a hill upwards feel, right? And then from here we can then add more geometry. We can control our loop cut in the middle, confirm, and then just start grabbing different vertices and just moving them around. So this is going to be a very custom process. I recommend moving both of these vertices at the same time for this seam here, right? Because it's blending the way it does, unless you want to kind of sort of drag out that a little bit, like so. This part's very custom to your liking, right? So you can just start manipulating this geometry very uniquely, very artistically, right? If you do too much, you might warp the UVs too much. You probably would have to unwrap again, either through uh, projection, view projection, or cube map or cube projection. But yeah, we're just going to kind of bring these different vertices. If you don't see a vertice like this, you could either X-ray mode, which for me it's Alt Z. For you, Alt Z might turn on your NVIDIA shadow play mode. You might want to turn that off in NVIDIA because it's I don't really use that personally. I don't know if you would, but I like X-ray mode with Alt Z, and then I can just move these vertices. You don't have to snap it to any axis. You can just snap it along your view, right? Maybe I want to make a little cliff here. If I add another loop cut, which I might not yet, but eventually I might want to, because we already were building beautiful quads, it's so easy. If I want to add some sort of interesting little cut in here, I can just Control R, loop cut, and then select these face or these edges, bring that in, bring that out. Create some variations like this. And like you're really I don't know if it's just like just me, but I'm getting excited looking at this and just thinking like, oh, this is already looking so much like a cool terrain, cool environment, right? I'm like, wow, it's already coming along so well, you know? That's a good thing though. That's a good style, right? But then the biggest part of that is League textures, League of Legends, for example, or TFT. It's all small, but they all do everything hand painted, right? And so we're kind of imitating that hand painted look through vertex colors, right? I know it is crazy. I love it. And let's say I want to take, maybe I take select this little chunk here, and then Shift D to sort of bring out that new geometry. You see it's kind of hovering right now. We might have to just sort of fix this up here. My snapping's already on vertex. I'm going to turn back on auto merge vertices and then just extrude, extrude. Actually, wait, I'm not going to do that way. I'm going to do it this way. Then extrude these. Select these, extrude, hold control, snap it there. Let's move that out. Right, so I'm just kind of, I took these 3 or 4 faces and I just kind of created this new rock formation here. You don't have to do this, but I'm just kind of adding this. Maybe I want to, oops, snap all those together, make a little column. The UVs are messed up here, so I'm going to click L to select the whole thing. And when you're doing terrain, you can just not worry as much about UVs. I'm just going to U, Q project, right? And then scale that a little bit, like such, and then just move that back. Maybe I'll do something like this, rotate. That looks a bit funky. Duplicate, move that down. Just create some interesting rock formations, you know? And I like to keep, remember again, having this loop cut close to the top, and then having the top, this quad, a darker green color, right? And because it's all one mesh, it's all blending really seamlessly. No sharp cut offs and everything, right? This might not look the most realistic, but it's definitely pretty good. I think. Maybe I want to bring this out a little bit. And also, remember, Shift E will crease edges. So you can sharpen up. If you want to exaggerate an edge like here, Control E, almost all the way, I can sharpen that up a little bit. Right? I shouldn't spend too much time on this spot right here. Right? Like that. I shouldn't ignore the other edges here. They're all still a little bit uniform, so I'm just gonna bring this. I want to bring all this down actually a little bit. Out. This part in. That's kind of fun. Right? This geometry you made is your canvas. You can start doing whatever you want with it. We're on good time so far. That's good. This is a long class. You're more than welcome to head out if you need to, because I'm just giving you the rundown of making terrain. This is kind of where I ended up with when I was working on this terrain earlier. And this is more just for you, right? For your environments to get something to ground your portfolio pieces on, right? Or to ground your diorama pieces on. And I find having a terrain like this is really beneficial to get that result. And maybe we want to bring these cliff edges down to match the level of this cliff edge here. So I can just start selecting. Here's a tip. If you select an edge and then control select an edge further along, it'll select everything in between. So I can just control select along a path I choose for it to go on up to about here. And I can just G, Z down like so.
So, so how do you fix, so stretching again?
Yes. To fix the stretching, remember we did make this nice seam here, so it's easy to just click L to select that entire seamed area.
So just you
And this
projection?
U Q project.
Okay.
Yes. And then you can scale it up however big or small you want it to be. Just remember there is going to be a little bit of a seam here up close, and you can mitigate that with different practices that I probably don't have time for today. But the gist is the UVs aren't warping terribly most of the time. Maybe I want to put something big here, like this. Maybe I'll duplicate this boulder. Right? Shift D, move that there. Like so. Let me look at some references because right now I'm noticing it's all pretty similar feeling. Maybe I want a very dramatically different color somewhere. Let's see. Lol terrain. Let's see what pops up. Right? Like we could have. Oh, it's good actually. We could simply just have a rock that's a solid color up here, like a little boulder. Maybe I bring this boulder here, turn it side, or yeah, I leave it like this. Stretch it along an axis. Duplicate, rotate it. Right, once you get the hang, really the hang of the GRS, scaling, rotating along axis, it's easier to just move things along and not think about it like I'm doing. I'm going to Control Tab with those selected. I'm going to vertex paint all this a darker color. Maybe make the top a little brighter, slight green, like this. Right, I like that. That's fun. And you can also go into vertex paint mode and just change any little bit, right? Any of this. Oh, whoops. Let me just turn off my mask mode and just paint anywhere. I could even do a little bit of a purple, a subtle purple, right? Oh yeah, this back part here is still flat. I'm going to fix that. I'm going to select some of these faces here. I'm just going to move some out. Oops. The different perspective views help a lot as well to make sure you break up that uniformity. Bring this out a little bit, bring this in, out, 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 in. Just a little variety. And if you think about it too much, you're gonna overthink how it should look versus terrain just looks the way it does. So you can't really control it. You could control it a little bit better if you look into how water affects terrain or different environmental things affect it, right? But from what I have perceived, I think terrain's it's perfectly imperfect, so I just kind of go with it. Oh, I didn't expect to do that. That's funny. I think I merged it down. Maybe I might keep that a little bit. I might do that like this because that looked kind of cool. Little scary drop off, you know? And it's okay if the geometry breaks a little bit because you still have the subdivisions that fix it up around it. If I turn off the subdivisions, this is what we're working with pretty much. This is the model fidelity. The subdivisions just smoothing it out, you know? Maybe I want to vertex color this here, like such. I think this is really cute. And a lot of this work I'm doing really caters to that portfolio diorama piece we're making. Oops. Right? So the scale of it's relatively reserved because of what we're going for, right? I'm not making it massive. It's a little chunk of land, you know? And I think this is really cool. You know, a cute little set. And maybe I want to add a little loop cut here, scale that out along a certain axis. And then as I go lower and lower, I'm just going to have larger and larger boulders or rocks that I've made. I'm going to pretend like this is like a floating island. Or to cut off the bottom, I'm just going to create some, I'm sort of just going to have this seam here fade into this rock, you know? Be careful though, because you might get some ugly looking lines like this if you're not careful. like I am being not careful. But you see, maybe I'll make this a really dark boulder. Make those really dark. Hmm. Careful not to do too much like I'm doing, or else it might just get too cluttered. Simplicity is still very nice, right? Maybe this vertex coloring here is a little too dark. I can just turn that up, color the top a bit green, or maybe a bit yellowish green, like that. Just touch it up, bit of blues. This rock's kind of just chilling. Right, I'm just kind of blending the last, like I don't want this bottom part to be open like this. I think that looks a bit strange. Maybe I'll do loop cut and, or like select here, control select over here. Oops, control select like this. And just GG, bring those down, scale it out, puff it up a bit. Select some of these. You can also, I haven't even used it once this whole time. Proportional editing. My goodness. Proportional editing is great. If you turn that on, you click G, you scale, you scroll your mouse wheel, you can move an entire area of geometry all at once. That's a really helpful little aspect. So yeah, for the proportional editing, there's this option up here, you see? If I turn this on, proportional editing, and then I select any vertice, click G and then scroll the mouse wheel, it'll change the size of the effect of the proportional editing. So you can change, you can move multiple parts of your mesh all at once by clicking just one area. Make sure you don't have it on when you're doing something like this. I'm going to turn it off here just to not affect anything else. Right? You might want to have all these rocks I'm placing are under the same mesh still. You might want, as you were saying before, like having, yeah, like a tile set or a kit bash of rocks. And instead of just placing all these as a single mesh, you could have a bunch of meshes of rocks and then put them like that.
So the real idea is mix and match with kit bash or a bunch of little stones or bedrock that you can just like hang,
Yeah.
and then you create the island so you have a lot more variety.
Yes. Right. So
That's so awesome.
it is, so it's amazing, right? You have this base terrain mesh. Yeah, that's a lot. Look at that. That's in X-ray mode. You have this base mesh, and then you can build those. You can put those kit bashed elements around, and because they're so big, these giant rocks around it, it's easy to fix up or hide all these terrain seams, right? And this is a nice looking float, a little bit there. I want to hide that. Let me just select. Also, you can, in proportional editing, you can change it to connected only, and it'll only affect the meshes that are a part of that, or the vertices that are a part of that mesh. So it won't affect the rocks if they're a part of the same mesh, right? And the way I'm making this, it's all very similar. Like all these rocks are very much the same kind of shades of gray and greens. This reference I have here, a lot of variation comes from the normal maps. They add a lot of variety and contrast with the sunlight. And we're not really getting much of a contrast here because our shapes are very sharp and there's not a lot of sunlight affecting it, right? You can see here, eventually we can add things like trees, foliage, bushes, flowers, ferns, mushrooms. This is the example here, but rubble. It's little things that might not seem like a lot at first, but it all adds up really, really quickly. Like just look at this on its own. With two assets, it's already feeling much more grounded in something real, right? Unreal, yeah, facts. Engine. I like this a lot. Yeah, and I think like I could keep going and going and going, but I might just stop here. Let me just fix my. There we go. Let me take a picture. And this is kind of the angle I was focusing on. You see here, you see one, two, three, four. Maybe I'll remove the mannequin for now. Bye bye mannequin. I want to take a screenshot. Oops. Hello. The blender just stopped. There we go. Boom. Boom. So that will be the extent of my terrain creation here. I will be hovering, doing my thing. You're all more than welcome to spend the time to work on your tiling textures due, I believe, tonight. You can use the grass texture we made today, maybe even add to it a bit if you would like. But this is actually a perfect example of when to use something a tiling texture like that, right? As you can see. So thank you for your time. This was a long one today. I'm going to be around answering questions, seeing what you've all done, if you still have your laptops out. And yeah, thank you.